So now I have reordered the entities a bit in order to make it easier to draw relations, because we already know that visit is quite a central entity that will connect its purpose and the doctor and the patient and the location where the visit was made. And we also have decided that a patient has an address, and maybe also the healthcare establishment has an address, something like this. But let's do it step by step and start with the association between visit and visit purpose. Actually, there's quite a lot to consider already here, and we would have to discuss with the customer as always. But let's make a best effort. So pause the video and try to make a relation between visit and visit purpose, and I'll do the same. Okay, so are you ready with the relation? Then let's have a look at my attempt. So this is what I came up with. So the easy thing maybe is the text. Not that, I mean, you must have written exactly the same text, but the reason that there is such a relation at all is that the visit purpose defines the reason for the visit. Right, but then what about the cardinality? Maybe before talking about cardinality, let's talk about the dashed line here. So there was the choice between the identifying relationship and the non-identifying relationship. And the difference is whether the child, the visit purpose, can exist without the parent, the visit. In this case, maybe not, but I decided not to care about here in the conceptual model about identifying or non-identifying relationship. We'll save that for later on when we start designing the database. So, okay, what about the cardinalities here? So I'm using the non-identifying relationship, and we'll do that for all. So what about the cardinality? First I wrote 1 here, which means that there cannot be a purpose without a visit. We don't have like general purposes like headache, broken arm, broken leg, and so on, and that are there waiting for someone to use them at a visit. We add purposes only as visits are made. This is of course also something we would have to discuss with the customer, as many other things. And then the cardinality at the other end is 1 to many, meaning that there is no visit without a purpose. You don't go to the doctor just to chat a bit, but there is a reason. And there can also be many reasons. There can be any number of purposes with the visit. This is of course also something we would have to discuss with the customer. Can you make a visit with multiple purposes? Or should it be always 1? But okay, this is what I came up with. So anything more to say about this? Well, we could say that what if you could only have exactly 1 reason to go to the doctor, then there would be exactly 1 visit would have exactly 1 visit purpose, and the visit purpose consists of just 1 attribute. So in that case, we could have considered to join these 2 entities and add purpose as an attribute in visit. Okay, but now we can have many attributes, so therefore I left it like this. We can also reason a bit about what is a description. If it's just a free text, then why do you need multiple? Okay, but you can write everything in this text. But okay, those are things that should be up for discussion with the customer, how they want to store their purposes of the visits and so on. But let's leave it like this and move on to the next relation. Maybe let's now look at visit to doctor. So again, pause the video and try to create this association. Right, so then let's have a look at this relation. So here's my suggestion for the relation between doctor and visit. So the reason is for this relation is that the doctor examines the patient during the visit. And what about the cardinality? So the cardinality for doctor is 1. There are no visits without doctors. The patient cannot examine themselves. And there are 0 or more visits. So the doctor can of course perform multiple, can perform multiple visits, or would be very limited use of the doctor if the doctor could only do 1 visit. But it can also be 0. The doctor might have been newly hired and have not performed any visit yet, examined any patient yet. So therefore it looks like this. I think that's quite clear. It should be something like this. Okay, so let's move on. And now we look at an interesting relation between doctor and person. So the reason for this relation is that the doctor can be a person. The doctor is a person. And the doctor has all the data of the first name, last name, person number, and so on of the person. And also the doctor can of course also get ill and have to go and see another doctor. So therefore this association, this relation between doctor and person enables the doctor to also be a patient, because there would be a relation between person and visit, right? But again, I think this thing, the doctor being a patient, is perhaps not that important, because we're not interested in the occupation of the patient, so we don't care if the patient happens to be a doctor or not. Right, but now let's have a look at this association between doctor and person. Again, pause the video and consider this association, this relation, I mean. So let's have a look at the doctor-to-person association. So here's my suggestion, and there are some interesting details here. First, let's consider the cardinality. So it's 1 at the person end, meaning a doctor is always a person. There must be a person related to each doctor. And it's 0 or 1 at the doctor end, meaning there are persons who are not doctors, of course. And the person cannot be more than 1 doctor reasonably, since they are okay. Okay, but then let's look at the name. That's interesting. The name was the doctor is a person. That's correct. But why not use inheritance then? Inheritance would be this symbol, like this. So this illustrates that doctor inherits person. This shows that doctor inherits person. And in fact, all the requirements for using inheritance are fulfilled. A doctor is a person, as we just saw, and all fields that exist in the person entity are relevant to the doctor entity as well. And person is a generalization of doctor. All doctors are persons. Person can handle the doctor and other persons, and doctor could be claimed to be a specialization of person. Yeah, the doctor is a person, but has is better at being a doctor because it has the employment ID, which is not in the person entity. So we could use inheritance here. That would be correct. Absolutely. We could cancel this and instead use this inheritance symbol. And that would be fine. But the question is why? Note, by the way, as a side note here in ASTA, delete just deletes the symbol but doesn't remove it from ASTA's internal model. If there is the inheritance thing here, we see that the doctor has rounded corner, since it's the subclass. And now if I just delete this, the doctor still has rounded corners because ASTA only removed the symbol. the generalization symbol. It did not remove the fact that the doctor is a subclass of person. But if instead we press Control D, the doctor now has square corners again, because it's now it does not consider it to be a subclass of person. Okay, back to the reasoning about 1-to-1-0 relationship versus inheritance. So the question is, why use inheritance, or on the other hand, why not to use it when it's correct? So the main point in using inheritance is that it stresses the fact that the doctor is a person. They are the same. It's not that, say that we have a rule saying a person can only live at one address, and an address can only house one person. We only have one person houses, and the person can only stay in one house. That means we would have some kind of one-to-one relationship between address and person. But still, a person would not be an address, right? But the inheritance relation stresses the fact that the doctor is a person. This 1-to-1-0 relation does not show that the doctor is a person. So that's the reason to use inheritance, I would say. The reason not to use inheritance is that it has no effect in the database. When we model the database, the inheritance will turn into such a 1-to-1-0 relation. So that's what will be in the database. And it just complicates things, you could claim. If it has no final purpose, it's just complicating things. When discussing with the customer about our model, we will have to explain what we mean by inheritance and is a relationship. Not using inheritance, we don't have to do that. Okay, that's my thinking. And as some of you might know, I am reluctant to inheritance, and also reluctant to unnecessarily complicating things without purpose. But your choice. If you prefer to draw a generalization, that's fine. Okay, lastly, let's consider the person to address relation. Then I won't do any more relations here in the video to keep the video reasonably short. I will do them after the video. But now, as our last exercise, let's consider person to address. So again, pause the video and think about that. Okay, our last relation in the video, I wrote it like this. The person lives at an address. Makes sense, I think. And I wrote 0-to-1 for address, a person, meaning we can examine the person. The person is allowed to be at the healthcare establishment even if we don't know their address. Of course, the person has an address. Well, the person might be homeless, of course, and in that case they don't have an address. Anyway, whether they have an address or not, we decided the fact is that the person can be examined at the visit even if the address is not known. So that's why it's 0-to-1 here. Could have been 0-to-many, meaning we registered multiple addresses for the person. But okay, the customer told us, we say we could imagine that they don't register multiple addresses. The person can of course have multiple addresses, but that's not of interest to the healthcare establishment. But of course, again, these are things we would have to discuss with the customer. And then here, 1-to-many, which is a bit interesting. Of course, it should be many, because many persons can live at the same address. But what about the one? The one thing here, why not many-to-0? So specifying many-to-1 here means that we do not have addresses without persons living there. Of course, there can be an empty house, but that's of no interest to the healthcare establishment. So the thinking here is that the customer once the address is, well, I mean, when the last person living at a certain address is deleted from a database or is no longer a customer of the healthcare establishment, then that address should also be deleted. So we don't keep records of addresses where no one is living. Of course, the customer could have a reason otherwise, saying they wanted to keep the addresses even if no one lives there for historical purposes, if they later wanted to recreate a history of persons who had made visits and had lived at that address. Okay, but we have that's again something, maybe that would have been wiser, but that's also something we would have to discuss with the customer. Okay, so let's leave it like this. So now I will end this video and I will finalize this conceptual model and upload it to the website. So at the course web you will find the complete conceptual model. Now there is just one more thing I would like to say a few words about before leaving this topic, and that's this doctor-person thing. So if we now say that we don't care about the profession of patients, whether the patient is a doctor or not, then why do we really need this kind of association between the doctor and the person? So there will of course be some kind of relation here between visit and person. Then why not rename person back to patient, which is what that table actually symbolizes, and remove this association and move the relevant fields here, and not move but copy, and have those fields also in the doctor entity. So this is another way to solve the same thing. What are the advantages and disadvantages of these two solutions? So a disadvantage with our current solution, having a relation between doctor and person, is that we are forced to have the same attributes for both doctor and person. Say that we don't, I don't know, maybe we don't care about the email address of the doctor, then the email is completely irrelevant for a doctor and will always be null for doctor persons until the doctor maybe becomes a patient, where the doctor will have an email. Okay, but that's a disadvantage. If maybe at some point in time there are attributes that are of importance to a patient but not to a doctor. A disaster would be if we had some kind of patient ID. Why should the doctor have a patient ID if the doctor is not a patient? So that would of course not be very nice at all. So that's the disadvantage of this solution. The disadvantage of the other solution, removing the association, renaming person to patient, and copying relevant fields to doctor, is that we now have some kind of duplicated data. Say that, I mean, if we realize that we should have multiple email addresses, it should be possible to store multiple email addresses, then maybe we want to make that we change both doctor and patient, and we will have to make it in two places instead of like now just in the person. Yeah, that way we have some kind of duplicated data, which is of course not a good thing. Right, so those are the pros and cons of the two solutions, and I think both can be defended. Both are reasonable. Here I will leave it like this, since we started with this kind of model, so I leave it like this.